Hello and welcome everyone to Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer. I'm your host. We're so glad that you are here and hope you stick around for the next hour for this wonderful story of addiction and recovery. We are live
Stop Facebook.
where a number of people
The opportunity to share.
She's one of our own.
They are like
Parts to your story that's awesome. You found healing. You found,
until I got sober.
can't wait for her to share that. I hate to know the different aspects of your story and what. Awesome.
Right.
All right, welcome back, everybody. I'm so glad that you're here and ready to kick off this hour of recovery and a wonderful story from a colleague and friend of mine, Joe from Dixon, Tennessee. Joe, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Patrick. Glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here and really appreciate it. So with that, we got the pleasantries out of the way. I'm excited to get into your story. So I will hand the floor over to you.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, thanks again for having me. It's such an honor and a privilege anytime I get to talk a little bit about, what my life was like before recovery and what it's like after. It's just an amazing thing to get to do this and maybe share a little experience, strength, and hope with you and some folks out there. But yeah, I am a guy who needed some help, needed a lot of help. Found myself, I guess I'll start at the end, which I found myself at age 33 on June 25th of 2015, living in, we'll call it a house. It had four walls. There was no running water, electricity on the east side of Nashville, with a crippling IV heroin addiction. Looking at my beautiful dog, Gibson, he's a retriever, Australian Shepherd, and sadly thinking, I wonder how much I could get for Gibson on Craigslist.
Wow.
Is this something where I could, get myself one more hit? And luckily, a couple men from a 12-step fellowship knocked on my door and did what's referred to as a 12-step call. Which I've gotten the opportunity to do many of since I've been sober, and drugged me out and took me to the hospital, and that started my journey into recovery. But it didn't always look like that. I've heard it said many times in the fellowship rooms that it's Park Ave or Park Bench, and this disease does not discriminate, and that's certainly true in my experience. I come from a wonderful family in a beautiful town called Yarmouth, Maine. Very idyllic. We, picked blueberries in the field in the morning, and my Italian mother would make blueberry pancakes and blueberry muffins, and we would, skate pond hockey in the winter, and, come from a upper middle class family with a lot of love. Now, saying all that, my father did end up getting sober when I was 11 years old. For the first 11 years, I grew up in what you would call an alcoholic home. Now, I've heard a lot of stories and worked with a lot of men over the years that have grown up as well in alcoholic homes, and those situations look different. Mine was not a home full of abuse, but there was a lot of screaming, a lot of crying, a lot of chaos, a lot of, where's dad? He's gone for 3 weeks. And, he ended up being someone who was successful in his career, but suffered from alcoholism. So everything I needed was provided for. I had the new hockey skates every year and new clothes and new shoes, and we had a great home and nice cars and the whole deal. But there was just a lot of chaos, and my mother, God bless her, not to fast forward too much, but, my father, my sister, my brother, and I are all now sober and in recovery. So wow. There was a time there was a time where my angel mother had all of us in full-blown alcoholism.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So she's referred to as someone with a black belt in Al-Anon. And we could talk a little bit about Al-Anon as well if you'd like, but certainly someone who's been through the ringer and has some tools and,
Sure.
and just an incredible person. But yeah, so, you know, they're really on paper, there weren't too many great reasons why a kid, you know, growing up in Yarmouth, Maine with every advantage and a loving Italian family with food and music and sports and well-rounded, there's really not much of a reason why I would decide that it would be a good idea to try heroin at 16. And, you know, leading up to that, I started smoking marijuana, started drinking. You know, a lot of my friends were doing that. But what I found, and I've heard this from a lot of guys, is that it just did something different for me.
Yeah.
You know, I remember that first drink, and me and my buddy Charlie, we stole every type of liquor you can imagine from his father's liquor cabinet. I think it was like peach schnapps, whiskey, vodka. We put it all in a Coke bottle, mixed it up, and drank it out in a field, and got drunk and passed out. And I woke up with a splitting headache and probably some vomit on me. And
Sure.
the first words out of my mouth were, "I can't wait to do that again. I cannot wait to do that again." So, you know, it did something magical for me. You know, I remember the first time I smoked marijuana, I remember thinking to myself, man, I want to feel like this all the time. You know, and I didn't know there was something going on with me. I didn't know that, you know, I was really uncomfortable until I got comfortable. You know, and I found that comfort through alcohol and drugs. At the time, the story I was telling myself was that I just really like to party. And that's one of the biggest lies that almost killed me. You know, at 33 years old with nothing left and felonies pending and all semblance of a good life destroyed, I still had this running narrative in my mind that, man, I just like to party. And you know, obviously that couldn't have been further from the truth. So, you know, I started getting in some trouble, started, you know, breaking some laws and messing around with drugs and alcohol and parties and, you know, all the things that I was warned against. And at age 15, I found myself sitting in a courtroom, having been arrested for I think it was burglary and theft. And, you know, again, it's hard to describe, but in this town, just beautiful town, everybody knows everybody. So immediately I'm now this outcast, you know, this black sheep. And, you know, all the, you know, the neighbors knew and the town knew. And so I found myself sitting in a courtroom, and this judge, God bless him, you know, gave me the option of either going to a treatment center for 30 days or going to juvenile hall till I was 18.
Joe, can I ask you a question?
You wouldn't think of, yeah, please.
So I know for many of us, we can identify that first moment that we really allowed ourselves to feel whatever shame and guilt that came with the consequences of our addiction. Would you say that this point was where you really experienced that for the first time?
Yeah, so it is funny that you should ask that when you did. Unfortunately, like I said, I wish I could say yes. This is where, as a 15-year-old guy, I felt the full weight of my consequences and was like, man, I want to be a different guy, and I'm so sorry for what I've done. Unfortunately, I looked at my lawyer and the judge in the courtroom and said, I need to think about it. You know, whether going to a treatment center for 30 days and getting some help, or, you know, going to juvenile hall till I was 18. So the arrogance and pride and thinking I know what's best for me, and a lot of themes that took me to some super dark places and made my life very difficult. And a lot of those ideas, things like, I don't really need to follow the rules. I'm just a little bit smarter and a little bit more clever, and I'll be successful at whatever I do and don't have to do what the rest of y'all do, was an idea that, I mean, I think back now at some of the jobs I've had in my life, and had some great jobs, great bosses, and great opportunities, and the ability to do my job, and the ability to do my job well. Those were never the reasons I got fired. The reasons I got fired were things like, I think I know what's best for myself and everyone around me, and I'm arrogant, and I don't need to do the menial tasks or the things I deem menial, even though they're part of my job description. So anyway, a lot of things that were going on with me, that I've begun to look at now in recovery. Now that I'm free from alcohol and drugs and the consequences that come from, addiction to alcohol and drugs, now I'm left with what's going on with me. What are those, underlying causes and conditions that made life so difficult to begin with? So, yeah, man. I treatment center in New Hampshire. It was beautiful. You think we had a personal chef. I met some great friends, and was given some great treatment, and got out. And by this point, my father had been an active, sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went straight home to a sober house, and not only a sober house, but a house where my father was able to take me to meetings and introduce me to people. And for the first time, at age 16, I got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. I got a sponsor. I was chairing meetings. Had a service commitment. Just a fellowship of young people trying to get sober. It was really a great time. It really was. And at some point, in that year, like I've heard a million times, I met the love of my life in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Of course.
Who would have thunk it,
Yeah.
And we were meant to be together, and she really understood me. And she was 19 and I was 16, and that was very appealing to me. And we fell head over heels for each other, and what do you know, we both relapsed. And that didn't go well, as you can imagine. And at this point, so I'm still in high school. Obviously, I'm 16 years old, and but again, I had made up my mind that I was going to do big things in life, and having a high school education was not one of the things required to do that. So I dropped out of high school, against, of course, the wish of my parents, and got my GED, and got an apartment with this girlfriend, and got a job selling herbal supplements on the phone. And it was a boiler room type of situation. People would call in, and we would sell these bottles of supplements, and having the gift to gab and a little bit of a silver top. And I did well at that, and made some good money. Of course, relapsed. So now I'm drinking, and I think smoking marijuana at the time, and things don't go well with me and the girlfriend. And eventually I find myself hanging around with some of the guys who had also relapsed, and they're doing some harder drugs now. And this is where it gets a little out of control, and started with cocaine. I can remember the first time I did cocaine like it was yesterday. I felt like I was Superman, and everything was going to be okay in the world, and I wanted to feel like this forever once again. And stayed up all night and spent every dime I had in my pocket. And you could literally just take an example and fast forward 15 years, and it's the exact same night, just replayed over again. I joke all the time, or not joke, but I talk with some of the guests that I work with. there are people out there that they just don't react like I do to alcohol and drugs. There are people that can safely have a few glasses of wine or a couple beers, or, I mean, the truth is there are some folks out there that can go to a bachelor party, do a little bit of cocaine, and go to bed, and then not do it again for 5 years or ever, and that's just not my story. It's just not, man. And the story I like to tell about that is I've got this friend Ed, and Ed's just a great guy, just one of my best buds, and grew up in the same kind of part of the country as I did, and he's got a wife and 3 beautiful children, just all American, great dude. And Ed drinks sometimes, and Ed once in a while will have maybe a few too many drinks sometimes. And again, so he's just, again, there's nothing wrong with that. But the example I can always remember is, we're in Las Vegas and we're at a bachelor party. And of course, I decide we all need cocaine because no bachelor party would be, complete without that. And so, we're drinking, we're having a good time, and we're doing a little bit of this cocaine. And well, they're doing a little bit. I'm doing a lot of it. And we end up back in the room, and it's midnight, and what do you know? Ed says, "Hey man, I'm done. I'm gonna go to bed." And that was my first indicator that Ed was not lying. 'Cause I stay on cocaine. It's noon the next day. Ed and the guys get up and they're like, "Hey, let's go. Enjoy our lives. We're in Las Vegas. Let's have." A big buffet and have some food and go to the pool. And they kind of see me like Gollum in the corner, the shades drawn, and I've got the plate in front of me, and I'm still up. And, like, "Oh man, you're still up." "Yeah, man. Well, we're going to go, eat some food." And, they know me well enough at this point. And they're like, "And by the way, I think if you check our pockets, there might even be some leftover blow from last night." And to someone who's not an addict, that may not seem like an important story, but if you're a guy like me, I've never had leftover cocaine, not one time. It's never happened. And so he has that ability to enjoy his life, drink a little bit, do a little partying, and then move on. And I just never had that in me. Something happens when you put a substance in my body, and it just sets off this chain reaction where I don't want to stop or can't stop,
Same here.
So, yeah, it's wild, man. It really is. And I know, working with men and their families, and it's so hard to accurately describe, alcoholism, drug addiction, whatever you want to call it, because it just seems so mystical. It seems so, "Oh, so you're telling me you put this substance in your body and then you can't stop." That seems so far-fetched, seems so far. Obviously, the evidence is there in people's lives where they're destroying their lives over the substance, and the, external, damage is there. So, there's something going on.
Right.
But this idea that once I put it in me, I lose control is just such a foreign, unbelievable thing to people that don't suffer from alcoholism and drug addiction. So trying to describe that to people is something that, I still have not mastered, but, I can only kind of give these stories and these little parables to try to deliver that message. But even my mother, someone who's been surrounded by alcoholism and drug addiction her whole life, I bet if we hooked her up to a lie detector test right now and said, "Do you believe Joe is going to stay sober just because he wants to? And if he uses, it's because he wants to. Do you believe it's a choice?" She would absolutely say yes. And
wow.
And to some degree, that's true. Eventually in recovery, we regain the power of choice. And what I had a hard time understanding was that, I didn't turn into the Incredible Hulk. You didn't put a glass of wine in my body and all of a sudden I, was like, "I don't want to be doing this, but I am." It didn't look like that for me.
Yeah.
What it looked like was, hey man, I'm going to go out and have a couple drinks tonight. And I would say that to myself, I've got a meeting tomorrow morning, and then I would have a couple, and somewhere in that second drink, I would change my mind, and then I'd have another one, and then another one, and another one. And next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm drunk, and now I'm going to miss my meeting in the morning. And I'm like, man, I shouldn't have had that 19th drink.
Right.
So yeah. So fast forward, I spent a couple years not doing well in Portland, Maine, after the relapse as a young man, and my brother had ended up getting sober and moving down to Nashville. So when it all, culminated at age 19, and I burned every bridge, and my parents didn't want me at their house anymore, they put me on a plane and they sent me down to Nashville to live with my sober brother. And I came down here and once again got involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I look back at those times and I don't know if, I just wasn't ready to hear the message, or I couldn't hear the message. That doesn't really matter. The point is I didn't. And, somewhere in there, a guy asked me, like, hey man, I heard you were in sales when you were, a few years back, and there's a temp agency hiring for this big IT company. Do you want to fill out an application? I was like, sure. And didn't think I'd get the job. I've got a GED, and but I did it anyway. I think I was painting houses at the time and just hated it. So I interview for this job. I get the job. Worked for a couple months for the temp agency, kind of answering phones for this other organization, and eventually they offered a position, with the company. I do well there. Get a series of promotions, and they eventually offered me a job to do sales in Ireland, in Dublin. And, so I of course take that job offer. Now I'm 23 years old and heading over to Ireland to live, just an unbelievable opportunity. And, so I was based there. My accounts were in London, so I got to travel quite a bit, and, got to see a lot of Europe, and meet some great people, and make some great money, and have a lot of opportunity. The whole time, alcohol and drugs are a massive, massive part of my daily life. Daily, I don't know if I went a day while I was overseas for a few years that I didn't put something in my body. But I was able to, keep it together-ish, and so. Eventually, I burned a bunch of bridges there, and like many other situations in my life, all of a sudden this opportunity presents itself, and I was presented with a management opportunity for that company back in Nashville. So on the outside, the story I would tell everybody is, man, I've got this great opportunity, and it was a great opportunity. In reality, I was running out of Ireland. I'd burned so many bridges there that I needed a change. I needed to get out of there. So, to the outside observer, it looked like things were going well once again. But internally, it was this house of cards. Financially terrible, emotionally terrible, friendships terrible. And if somebody could, peek in and see what was really going on in my life, it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. But I just wouldn't allow really anyone to get close enough to see what was really going on with me. And I came back here, and it didn't take long back in Nashville for my cocaine addiction to completely take off. And I'd be hiding in conference rooms at my big corporate job, locking the doors, out of my mind, really. And so I lose that job as I should. And somewhere in there, and this is where it starts to get a little crazy, somewhere in there, I had met some people who had some really good marijuana, and lots of it. And I decided I was going to take my enterprising sales mind and go into the weed business. And I did. And I spent the next 5 years selling weed and making money. And eventually, I found myself eating some prescription opiates. And keep in mind, I had this heroin addiction as a teenager. I'd set that down, and I didn't touch another opiate until this time. So it's one of those things I never really connected the dots. And I know I talked to a lot of guys, and normally the story is I started with prescription painkillers. I couldn't find any more. Someone offered me heroin. I did that, and then my addiction took off. Mine was a little bit, opposite, where I had already the heroin deal. So when I tried prescription painkillers, I didn't quite put it together. This was basically the same thing. I didn't really understand that. And so I did that, of course. Then the cycle began where one day I couldn't find any more. And, so-and-so had some heroin, and which I said I would never, ever, ever do again. But I did it. And it fell off like a ski jump so quickly. I could barely, keep the lights on in this house. I wasn't even a good drug dealer anymore, really. And so eventually the Davidson County Drug Task Force had some problems with my business practices, and they came in the door and tore down my little operation. And I say it's not some massive thing. I don't want it to come off like I was Don Corleone or anything here. I mean, I had a little house and I was selling weed. They thought that was not something they wanted in that nice neighborhood, which they were absolutely correct. And so got some real charges for the first time in my life, and got a great lawyer, and lots of deals with the DA and pretrial diversion, all these things that I still don't know quite too much about. But end of the story is I end up in treatment once again. And this time, I want to be there. And I remember going into treatment, and my family was just like, is this real? It was just such a relief to everybody, and everybody got on board. And I was like, man, I want this so much, and I want to be sober. And I spent 90 days in an amazing facility in Nashville. Great clinical program with some 12-step as well. Then went to a sober living house when I got out. And, I look back on that, and, again, in my mind, I really wanted recovery. I really, really did. And I wanted to be sober, and I seemingly was doing the deal. I seemingly was going to meetings and calling a sponsor. But in hindsight, I look back on it, and I was still doing my program of recovery. I was still doing it the way I wanted to do it. The perfect example, I remember being in this house, just a wonderful place in West Nashville. The woman that owned it had basically let me stay there for free. And, she had set up art therapy on a Wednesday night, and I just decided I'm going to do something else. I'm going to go to this mindfulness meditation thing. And I came back, and she was like, well, why weren't you at art therapy? I was like, oh, not to worry. I was doing this other recovery related thing. And she said, well, that's not what you were supposed to be doing, Joe. I said, yeah, but what I was doing was better for my recovery. You don't get it. He said, no, you don't get it, Joe. Recovery is doing what you're supposed to be doing for the first time in your life. And I argued with her for the next hour, couldn't hear a word she had to say. And what do you know, a couple weeks later, I had relapsed in the bedroom of that sober living house, and back on dope, and somehow got out of there and found this little place in East Nashville. And then for the next 9 months of my life, it was just utter chaos. IV heroin addict, crack, cocaine, anything I could get my hands on. I was working a little construction job. It just completely destroyed everything. My parents, who were finally beginning to trust me a little bit again, that was gone. It was the darkest time of my life.
Yeah.
It's in the literature of a lot of 12-step fellowships, and I've heard the story many, many times, and it's absolutely true for me, but how dark it is before the dawn. And I didn't know that I was about to be set on a path which would be the beginning of something so wonderful, which is this life of recovery that I have today. At the time, it felt like it was over. It felt like there's no reason to keep going. For me, apparently, that's what it took to get me to a place where I was willing to hear the message and willing to do what was necessary. And yeah, these two men, they came and got me. They got me into Vanderbilt, actually. And it's interesting. I talk a little bit about what happens to me when alcohol or drugs goes in my body, what it does for me. And I think that's really important for a guy like me to understand, is that if you were to give me alcohol every day for a year and take it away, there would be some physical things that would happen to me, some science. I would go through withdrawals.
Mm-hmm.
If you put it in my body and put me behind the wheel of a car every day, I'd probably get a DUI. These are some of the consequences that happen as a result of drinking and drugging. But what makes me, an alcoholic or an addict is the thing that happened to me the first time I did it. When you put alcohol in my body, just something magical happens. And the best description of that I have is that day. So I'm suicidal and homicidal and they're hopeless and there's nothing left in my life. And these two men pick me up and they say, well, Joe, you're indigent and you have no insurance and no money. So we need to get you drunk to get you into the hospital. This is like the first bit of good news I'd heard in a long time. And, so they grab me and they take me to this liquor store and they get me a half at the whiskey. And I remember I was shaking and I was sick. And, this is not advisable, by the way. We have much better detoxification methods these days. This is some old school stuff. And so they grab me and I start drinking this whiskey down. And next thing you know, that thing happens. And I looked over at this guy. I said, Jerry, my friend, I have overreacted. Can you just go ahead and take me back to East Nashville to this house with no electricity, no running water? And he was like, get your butt in there. But that's what happens, man. My life can be over internally and externally for that matter. And you put a little bit of this substance in my body and I have a complete psychic change. It's just something magical to me. So I get detoxed there, and this same wonderful woman who helped me at this sober living house, I called her and said, I'm desperate. I will do anything. I need help. And she, through a foundation that she runs, got me into Discovery Place, which is where I now work. And it's an all men's 12-step immersion program out in Burns, Tennessee. And I showed up on the doorstep here just absolutely broken. I showed up, emotionally, spiritually bankrupt, and physically also broken. Found myself for the first time around a bunch of men who not only, had been where I'd been, like really been where I'd been and knew how I felt, but also their lives were changed. I was looking at this example of transformation and recovery right in front of me. I remember there was a guy early on in that first week. I sat down with him on the back porch and we were having a smoke and talking. And he looked at me and he was 9 months clean. And he said, Joe, I don't know if you know this, but there's real heroin recovery out here. There are a lot of men who may be heroin addicts that are years sober that have wonderful lives. And I don't know if I'd probably heard that before, but the way he said it to me, the depth and weight that statement had coming from this man, just it hit me. And I remember thinking to myself, like, tell me what I got to do. What do I got to do to get that? I wanted it so bad.
Yeah.
And what I didn't understand was that I was beginning to do the steps. I looked at the steps on the wall for years, and they just kind of looked like something from the 30s some guy wrote in some book. And how was that going to help me with my addiction? I got real problems. I need like a lawyer and 50 grand,
Right.
that kind of solution, not, these steps on a wall. It was explained to me, out at Discovery that behind these steps are these principles, these spiritual truths that when I begin to apply these truths to my life, I begin to see an internal change, and I have a new relationship with all these things in my life, whether that be myself, my family, my work, and my community. And, it was this internal change that was needed. I was constantly going through life trying to fix everything externally to make myself feel better on the inside, and it just was not working. Just was not working. And so out here, like I said, broken and kind of funny and sad, which is, I guess, this whole story. But I woke up on day 7 and I'd had, I don't know, some sort of brain damage, I guess you could call it, coming off all the alcohol and drugs. And my left eye stopped working. It just completely pointed in. And I was seeing double. There were 2 alarm clocks. It was just a nightmare. So, they got me an eye patch. My guide here was very kind, and he bought me a little black eye patch, and they called me Pirate Joe, which I think my the humility was necessary, I guess you could say. And so, I remember walking around here, but, I'm stone cold sober. I've got an eye patch on. I'm homeless. And I've the same clothes I've been wearing for 3 weeks on, but I still think I know what's best for me. And that's the insanity of this thing, is that I'm completely removed from alcohol and drugs. They're out of my system, and I'm 3 weeks clean and sober, but I still have this mind. I still, we talk about it like it's this alcoholic mind. I've got this mind that says I know what's best. I'm kind of restless. I'm disconnected from reality. And the big story that I would always tell myself, either sitting in a trap house or sitting in a treatment center or sitting in a jail cell, was that I'm one move away from getting it all back. And that's the big delusion. I am one move away. I remember sitting in that house in East Nashville, and it's all burned down. Me and Gibson, poor little guy, sitting there, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, I just gotta get my LinkedIn profile together, and I gotta like buy a suit and get it tailored and pressed, and and then I'll be back in the boardroom in a few weeks. And what I failed to see, I was so disconnected from realities. I was about 1,000 moves away from just being a someone who had credit, let alone working back in the corporate world. So anyway, point is, completely disconnected from reality. So I needed a lot of help. And what I found out here was men's grace, a lot of grace. And I think, again, being on the other side of that, having been where they've been and they had been where I'd been, I really get to have a lot of empathy for the situation that these guys are in, and say, man, I know what that's like. Not that, I think I know exactly what it feels like to sit there in your shoes. And so I come out here, and some people got together and helped me, get into a sober living house when I got out of my 30-day treatment, and started the meetings, started working the steps. And out here at Discovery Base, a staff member, except for a couple in administration and in finance, not only are in recovery, but they went through this program. So we've got 42 staff members now, and all these men got sober at Discovery Place, which is something pretty unique that I haven't found too many other places. And so I feel a real vested interest in what goes on out here and how these men do. And it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to give back to the place that literally saved my life. And, these guys took me in not only while I was here, but when I got out of treatment, I was completely immersed in the community. And for me, that's really where the recovery took place. I learned some great tools in treatment and some great ideas and got a great foundation. But, at 4, 5, 6 months sober, when I'm in a sober living house and, losing my mind, but I'm surrounded by a ton of guys who get it, and we're going to the movies and we're going to meetings and we're going out to eat, and we're able to walk this journey together. For me, I think that was the difference between sitting where I am now and sitting back in a jail cell, really.
Absolutely.
I was not a guy who could do 30 days of treatment and go straight back to it. That's just not my story. I know that there are those folks out there. Again, that's just not my story. But life today is a complete 180, man. It really is. It's unrecognizable. It's completely unrecognizable. I've got just a wonderful life. And not only that, and I'll say this too, I think it's really easy to judge my progress in recovery based on what's going on externally in my life. It's like, great. So I stopped, doing drugs and drinking and doing felonies before breakfast. And yes, my life got a lot better. That's not rocket science, right? Yeah. I own a home and have a beautiful wife and just great family and, the whole deal. But really what this deal has given me is a new experience with all those things. Walking through this world with some peace of mind and some purpose and some direction. That's something I always want. I never knew I wanted or needed that. I was the kind of guy, really, man, I was enduring life. It's the best way to describe it. Let me just get through till the next paycheck or get through to whatever, the next vacation. Let me just get through to, whatever it was, I was enduring. I was never enjoying my life. And what I found today is that there's this little trap door built into spirituality. There's this little trap door built into this life. And that is, when I'm thinking about myself and how I can serve me, it just doesn't taste right. It just doesn't give me that effect. But as soon as I start thinking about you and how I can help you and how I can add something to this world, what do you know? I start feeling that sense of purpose and that power flow through me, and eventually, going through this process, I'm not a guy that can just decide I want to stop doing heroin and do that. I've proven that time and time again. But as a result of going through the steps and applying these to my daily life, what happened was, man, I woke up one day and I was no longer thirsty.
Mm-hmm.
And for a guy like me, like that's the only answer. Because if I'm thirsty, I've proven time and time again that there is no consequence big enough. There is nothing I care about enough to keep me from putting that substance in my body. This is not theory, this is fact.
Yep.
So for a guy like me, I have to somehow learn and be okay in this world and not be thirsty. And the only way I've ever found that is to live this spiritual life. And I got way more than I bargained for. Honestly, I was looking for, just keep me out of jail, give me a little apartment, maybe a job at a gas station, let me live out my days in solitude. Like, really, those are my ambitions, and I got way more than I bargained for. Yeah. So I hope that helps somebody, really.
Absolutely.
I know that, if you're watching this, you're probably either in recovery yourself, or maybe it's a loved one that, is struggling right now and trying to get sober. But just remember, there's always hope. If we're breathing, there's hope. And I will just give one more shout out for the idea of long-term recovery. I think that whether that's IOP or PHP or sober living or whatever it is, it just takes some time for guys that are really struggling, and women too. I keep saying men because I work with only men at Discovery Place, but for anyone who is struggling, it takes time.
That's right.
So thank you so much, Patrick, for having me on, man. Really, it's such a privilege and an honor to get to share my story with you.
Awesome. Joe, thank you so much for getting vulnerable and sharing this wonderful journey of yours with all of us. I know Discovery Place holds a near and dear place in my heart as well, because it is what got me sober as well. And I owe an unimaginable wealth of gratitude for Discovery Place saving my life too. This year I'll be celebrating 10 years, and it's a wonderful program we are so grateful to have here in the Middle Tennessee area. So, I will say, if anybody's struggling, you can reach out to us. You can also reach out to Discovery Place and ask for help. Joe, can you tell us a little bit about how people can connect with you guys at Discovery Place?
To get connected and learn more about Discovery Place, you can absolutely check out our website. It's discoveryplace.info, or you can call me directly on my cell phone. My number is 615-419-8018. Call me night or day. I would love to talk to you and find out how we can help you or your loved one. We are an all-male facility. It's a small campus, 24 beds on our main campus, and we're broken up into 3 phases of long-term care. So whether you're wanting to do 30 days of treatment or up to a year, we can help. So please reach out, check out our website, and I'd love to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joe. Really appreciate it again. And for everyone watching, thanks for your time. Thanks for sticking with us. And we're always so glad when you join us for Recovery Stories. We air every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central. I would like to leave everyone with this last thought, word of encouragement. If you are struggling right now, I would ask that you just muster up whatever courage you can, reach out and tell someone, anyone, and let them know that you need help. We've also provided resources for you at the bottom of the screen, or you can reach out to Joe and Discovery Place. Please do that. And final thought, be kind to one another and take care of yourselves. With that, our time is up. We're so glad that you're here, and hope you have a great rest of your day.